Thank you, Monica. Now I have the pleasure to invite our next speaker, Erő Zoltán, Chief Architect of Budapest Municipality. His works include those of preservation of architectural heritage and infrastructure construction. He's the founding curator of Center for Contemporary Architecture. Besides taking part in urban planning and public space development projects, Erő works for years on the revitalization of historic towns, public spaces and buildings, so hopefully we will hear more about cultural value. He worked for the Urban Renewal Program and the development concept for Budapest around 2000. As a general architect for Budapest Underground Line Metro 4, he was the leader of architects responsible for the architectural concept of the line, and was also architect in charge for the stations. I think I will stop here with the presentation because your CV is way longer, but yeah, I will give you the floor in the 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I have to thank you to invite me here, and I think that already I have learned a lot, so it was worth to come. That's an important thing. This is the last slide. I was quite sure. So here we are. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to speak about Budapest living estates, but I was asked by my friends to speak about a legislative system that we have already in Budapest, the so-called local protection. Local protection is a mean for the municipalities, while we have the national protection, which is a mean for the central government. Local protection is considered to be in the second line because the most important monuments are protected by the states, and those who are interesting for the locals should be locally protected. Anyhow, since our government today is absolutely not interested in the post-war architecture and in modern architecture and in socialism, nobody does any steps to have more and more centrally protected buildings from the 60s or 70s. That's why in the last years we ran ahead like pioneers on the road to protect at least several hundred buildings in Budapest, which we or experts consider to be valuable. Let's see a few of them. This is a picture from 1947, when after the Second World War, even the progressive architects thought that will be the cityscape of the city center. It is quite close to the medieval center. One can see the National Museum and the church. But the whole idea was to change completely this urban fabric, which never happened. But I wanted to show this, that protection on the original texture and protection on the future imaginations can be rooted in this picture as well. We have protected buildings from the so-called coalition times. Before the communists get power, we had a democratic period for a few years, quite in a modern style. These are the upper two buildings are protected by the National Heritage Board, and we protected the following. We didn't hesitate that socialist realist buildings should be protected. Once again, the upper two buildings, University and the Cultural House, is protected on the national level. We protected following buildings. The great architectural debate was in Hungary in 1951, when the modern movement has lost the debate. Controls were given to the socialist realist period. After 1956, as early as possible, architects re-stabbed stepped back to the modernist culture, and a kind of experimental period began when these buildings were experiments for the repetition of the buildings in every corner of the city or even countryside. A few buildings are very nice and we like them from this period. We have given names for these modern periods, the playful modern, human scale modern. A lot of architects have invented new things. They have used new tools. They have made new formal solutions, technical solutions. So all of these buildings from the 60s are some interesting creatures. We are very proud to have new buildings in old settings in the medieval city center of Buda, the Buda Castle here. And we can see that very fine approach between the new architecture and the historic remains of the medieval buildings. Unfortunately, our government at the moment makes very rude interventions in the same tissue or texture of the medieval city center, following a kind of, we call it historic populism, what we can see in Budapest now. But on the list, on the protection, local protection, we followed up with artistic buildings, children's home or school buildings. We could make infills in the city center or new brutalist buildings at the time, which we like at the moment very much, and even Cake organized the Budapest 100 visit to this right low corner building, which is one of the most beloved brutalist building in Budapest. This is the technical modern, because factories and industrial units were at least so important as living estates, because it became a kind of identity. It became a part of identity. It became a kind of language that we could understand and we could speak. And we think that the protection serves in this moment the cultural identity. It is not possible to erase from people's life 40 years. People were young when they were working here. People, they were in love when they were walking around the streets. You cannot get rid of, because it was made by the so-called communists. But the legislation has certain obstacles, and we didn't speak too much about this up to now. What can I achieve? So what for? You have seen yesterday the building on the left side. This is the so-called water tower building, protected on our list. But I don't promise that I can get rid of these windows infilled in the loggias. You have to realize that in Halle-Neustadt, you have no infills in the loggias at all. In Vienna, you have no infills. In Budapest, you have a lot of infills. And if you go to farther on the east, up to Tbilisi, you will have quite a large system of creations. Or I don't promise that I can achieve that people, when paint their loggias, should use the same yellow color and should make it at the same time. Or on the lower corner, you can see a building where that was a black one, and the co-author of the original architects has redesigned it after 1990, added a new pyramid in the courtyard, and change the black color to a reddish one, which is a very, very narrow path to judge whether it can be protected or not, because it is a completely different building. But buildings have life, buildings have are changing, and we cannot say that we can get frozen all these buildings. So I think it will be an interesting discussion to speak about these questions. And there is a question of the relation to our heritage. This is one of the most important modern buildings in Budapest. People hate so much that we didn't dare to protect it. Because if we go to the city council saying that we have a list of 100 buildings among with them, then perhaps the whole structure is collapsing, because they say that I will never agree the protection of this one, it should be exploded. This is a dilemma. I don't know the answer yet. Already we have mentioned that the virtual salvage of the Budapest Historic Museum is very important. These buildings are not existing anymore, that you can see on the pictures. The exposition of the virtual salvage on the main public squares with Marta, who was already mentioned earlier, is absolutely important, because we see that people should know about these buildings. People should understand that somebody sees it as a value. And just a final slide. What can we propose for the living estates? We can propose the best nursery school. Yesterday, Harald told us that what you need in a living estate, the best schools, the best nursery schools, and the best traffic and the communication, absolutely new green areas in the middle of the living estate, and new marketplace on an unused parking lot. This is just to finish that this hotel that I've shown you before is the most publicated building, modern building with the bridge, Elizabeth Bridge, because it was on the 500 forint note. So everybody knew this modern building, but everybody has different opinion. Thank you for your attention.